All right, let's get right into it. When you picture the Roman Empire, you probably think of legions marching, conquering everything in their path. But what if I told you its greatest strength wasn't just about winning wars, but about knowing when to stop fighting them? In this explainer, we're going to look at the Roman Empire at its absolute peak, to understand the surprisingly cautious strategy that didn't just build it, but held it all together.
You know, there's no better way to set the scene than with these famous words from the historian Edward Gibbon. He's not just talking about size here. He's painting a picture of an empire that saw itself as the absolute center of the world, a beacon of civilization, enjoying a level of peace and prosperity that was just unheard of.
So, what exactly was this golden age? Well, it was this incredible period of stability, an era of strength that was really defined by peace. Historians often call it the Age of the Antonines.
For more than 80 years, think about that. That's a long lifetime. Rome was led by a series of 5 just remarkably skilled and virtuous emperors. This wasn't a fluke. From Nerva all the way to Marcus Aurelius, these guys were actively managing and securing a public order that the world, frankly, had never seen before and might not have seen since.
And this brings us to the real heart of our story. How did they pull it off? How did they maintain that stability? The answer is, well, it's kind of surprising. It was a strategy based on knowing when to say, that's it, we're done, this is enough.
And this whole idea, it goes all the way back to the very first emperor, Augustus. You see, after centuries of just non-stop expansion under the Republic, Augustus had this radical realization. He figured out that Rome actually had way more to lose than it had to gain by trying to conquer more territory. He called it the spirit of moderation. And get this wasn't just some friendly advice he passed along. As Gibbon tells us, Augustus wrote this command into his last will and testament. It was a formal instruction, a legacy for every emperor who came after him, basically telling them, hey, stop trying to conquer the world, start protecting the one you already have.
And he was very specific. These weren't just random lines on a map. No, Augustus chose borders that were natural, defensible barriers. You had the Atlantic Ocean in the west, the massive Rhine and Danube rivers in the north, the Euphrates River in the east, and to the south, the endless deserts of Africa. This was a blueprint for a secure and, more importantly, a manageable empire. Of course, you know how it goes. You make a rule, and someone is eventually going to try and break it. A policy this big was bound to be tested, and the few times emperors decided to ignore Augustus's advice, well, those are the moments that are so revealing. They really become the exceptions that prove the rule.
And what you get is this incredible clash of ideas. On one hand, you've got Augustus's very cautious defensive game plan. On the other, you have the Emperor Trajan. Now, he was an old soldier, and he dreamed of glory, of matching the legendary conquests of Alexander the Great. This was a real battle over the very soul of the empire. Was strength found in peace or in conquest?
So the first big exception was the conquest of Britain. It was this slow, 40-year grind to take over most of the island. Why did they do it? Well, it was close to Gaul, which they already controlled, and, funnily enough, there were these persistent rumors about rich pearl fisheries. Spoiler alert, those rumors turned out to be a total bust.
The second and much bigger exception was Trajan's war in Dacia, which is basically modern-day Romania. This was a huge deal. He launched a massive 5-year-long war to crush the Dacians, who were known as these incredibly fierce warriors. He won, and in doing so, he created this huge new province, pushing the empire's borders way out.
But here's the kicker. The emperor who followed Trajan, Hadrian, he took one look at these sprawling new territories Trajan had conquered in the east, and he immediately gave them up. Just like that. He pulled the legions all the way back to the Euphrates River. It was a stunning move, basically admitting that Trajan's glorious conquests were too expensive and too difficult to hold. It was a powerful reaffirmation of Augustus's original defensive plan.
Okay, so a defensive strategy is a great idea, but it's just a piece of paper unless you have the muscle to back it up, right? So how did Rome hold this massive frontier and keep it peaceful for so long? Simple. By having the most powerful and disciplined military machine the world had ever seen. Let's just start with the numbers to get a sense of the scale. At its height, the Roman military, that's army and navy combined, was about 450,000 men strong. That is a colossal force, almost entirely dedicated to one thing: guarding the borders.
And the heart and soul of this army was the legion. Each one was basically a self-contained mobile death machine. You're talking over 6,000 elite heavy infantry, but they also had their own cavalry unit and their own artillery, dozens of war engines. It was an absolute masterpiece of organization.
So how did they create the men for this machine? Through pure, brutal, relentless training. First, you swore an oath to literally sacrifice your life. Then you trained with weapons that were twice as heavy as the real thing, so your actual sword felt light as a feather. You marched 20 miles a day with all your gear, and then, at the end of that exhausting march, you had to build a fortified camp, from scratch, every single day. And this quote, right here, it gets to the psychological genius of the Roman army. The discipline was so strict, the punishment so severe, that a Roman soldier was conditioned to be more afraid of his own centurion standing behind him than he was of the enemy charging at him. Think about that for a second.
So where did they station all this military might? Not in the cities, not to control the population. They were parked right on the borders. And look at this. A staggering 80% of all the legions were stationed along just two frontiers, that Rhine-Danube line up north and the Euphrates in the east. This was literally a wall of steel, enforcing Augustus's grand strategy.
So we've seen the strategy, and we've seen the shield that protected the empire. Now let's just take a moment to appreciate the mind-boggling scale of the world that shield was built to defend.
It's one thing to talk about provinces and frontiers, but what does that actually mean on a map? What land did Rome actually hold in its hands? Okay, let's just do a quick flyover. If we start in the west, we're talking about all of what is now Spain and Portugal. Then we sweep up into Gaul. That's modern France, Switzerland, Belgium. And of course, a huge chunk of Britain. Moving east, you've got the imperial heartland of Italy, and it's all protected by that heavily fortified Danube frontier. That line of forts and legions ran right through what we'd now call Austria, Hungary, and the Balkan states. And then you swing around to the east and south. This is where the serious wealth was. We're talking Asia Minor, modern Turkey, Syria, and of course the crown jewel, Egypt, which was the breadbasket for the entire empire. From there, Roman control stretched across the entire coast of North Africa. They didn't just border the Mediterranean, they owned it.
So you have this empire of just staggering size, incredible wealth, and amazing diversity. It's all held together by a wise defensive strategy and the most disciplined military on the planet. I mean, it really seems like a system that was built to last forever, which of course leaves us with that one final ominous question. With an empire this vast and a military this disciplined, what could possibly go wrong?